Good evening. We're back with another episode of the LOTR LCG Progression Series, and tonight is a card review of Wrath and Ruin, the first quest of the Vengeance of Mordor cycle, first adventure pack of the Vengeance of Mordor cycle. So let's take a look. The hero is Thorin Stonehelm, 9 threat, 1/3/1, 4 health. After Thorin Stonehelm is declared as an attacker, discard the top card of your deck to deal 1 damage to an enemy engaged with you. There's not much to speak of with this hero, really. His stats aren't good enough. There's a lot of other 3 attack heroes, many that do more than this ability does. This essentially promotes him to a 4 attack hero. It's not bad. 4 attack is relatively rare on a hero, at the cost of discarding a top card of your deck, which can be a steep cost or not much cost at all, depending on what you discard. Interesting card. It gets better with Durians buffing him. So I do think this gives the dwarf deck more options. The kind of king of battling in dwarf decks right now for me would be Gimli, Tactics Gimli. And this gives another option. It kind of strikes me as similar to Thorin Oakenshield, because Thorin Oakenshield was designed to give another leadership option. It seemed to me he was designed to give another leadership option for another player who wanted to play dwarves and who wasn't playing Dying. And Thorin kind of seems to fill a similar role to me. He gives an option for a combat dwarf to a player, to a second dwarf player, if the first player is already playing Gimli. So you can have one player play Durians, one player play Thorin Oakenshield, one player playing Gimli, one player playing Thorin Stonehelm, and you'll have 2 pretty good combat dwarves, with Gimli being the better one and Thorin being close behind. Now, in a vacuum, what circumstances would you play him in if you were outside of a dwarf deck? He's not as good at combat as Bjorn. I don't think he's as good at combat as Grimbjorn either. Grimbjorn the Old. So I don't think he's really got a role except in a dwarf deck or in a fun deck, because he's outclassed by other heroes. What he brings to the table is pure damage, and he doesn't bring enough pure damage to warrant his inclusion over heroes that do the same thing but better. Except in a dwarf deck, and those are not common anymore. I don't think he significantly upgrades the dwarf deck, since dwarf decks already have Gimli. Soldier of Gondor, 2 cost, 1/1/1, 2 health. Gondor. After Soldier of Gondor enters play, search the top 5 cards of your deck for a Gondor ally and add it to your hand. Any number of Gondor allies instead if your threat is 40 or higher. Shuffle your deck. I think this card has a place in the Gondor deck. It gets to 2 willpower with Visionary Leadership, or 2 attack with Boromir, and draws you a card. That's pretty good. Draws you a card sometimes, often if you're playing Gondor Swarm. This has got a place in a Gondor deck. I like it for that. I don't like it at all outside of a Gondor deck, but I do like it in a Gondor deck. I'd run it. I don't know if there's much more to say about it than that. Run it in a Gondor deck, don't run it outside a Gondor deck. If you're running like Gondor Light, that's a conversation. Like you're not running a full slate of Gondor allies, or you're not running a Gondor Swarm deck, but you're running a Gondor deck with some Gondor synergy. Well, that's a conversation. Depends on how often you're going to draw the Gondor ally. If you're not buffing this card, you need to draw the Gondor ally almost every time. to make it worth it. You're not buffing with this card with Visionary Leadership or Boromir. So, yeah, in a Gondor Swarm deck, it's pretty good though, I think. Pillars of the Kings, 4 cost. While your threat is less than 40, reduce the cost to play Pillars of the Kings by 4. So it's free if your threat's less than 40. Set your threat to 40. If this effect raised your threat, draw a card. Draw 4 cards instead if it raised your threat by 10 or more. Interesting. Well, that's really good in a Valor deck. A deck that's designed to have cards that only take effect when you're at 40 or above. Because you can instantly get there for free and draw 4 cards. That's an insane buff for a Valor deck. It may single-handedly make the Valor deck worth looking at least as a fun thematic deck. I don't think it's going to elevate a Valor deck to elite status because of the inherent risk of raising your threat to 40. You wouldn't, for example, want to do that in most quests on turn 1 without really effective threat reduction, because it would just be too risky. You would threat out too much. If you raised your threat to 40 and drew 4 cards on turn 1. You could use future copies of Pillars of the Kings to lower your threat back to 40. Well, it would be fun and thematic, I think, but probably not elite. Unlikely to be elite. An elite deck, because the Valor effects, they're all decent, but none are so strong that you can build a deck around them like you can with Elrond Villia, or with some Aristor decks, or some of the contracts that are coming up. It's good, but not elite, and it at least makes the Valor deck more fun to play, that's for sure. Cautious Halfling, 2 cost, 1/0/1. After Cautious Halfling enters play, look at the top card of the encounter deck. If that card is not an enemy, draw a card. So a 1/0/1 that sometimes draws you a card, maybe 60% of the time draws you a card. I don't think that's good. It's probably a card just for a Hobbit deck. So far, every card in this adventure pack has been, it seems, intended for a fun or thematic deck. Thorin Stonehelm the Hero goes in the Dwarf deck. Soldier of Gondor goes in the Gondor deck. Pillars of the Kings goes in a Valor deck, and Cautious Halfling fits in the Hobbit deck. None of these are good cards in a vacuum. None of these elevate their synergies to elite status. These are fun cards. This seems so far to be a adventure pack aimed at fun thematic decks. Cautious Halfling, with 1/0/1 stats, it would need to draw a card nearly every time to be good. Or actually every time. If it just read 2 cost, 1/0/1, 2 health, draw a card, I still don't know if I would play it a lot of the time. It's too expensive. It would need to cost 1 and draw a card every time to be really good. Tom Bombadillo. And we'll talk about Tom Bombadil at the same time. 2 cost, play only if you control a Hobbit hero. You cannot play this card if there's a copy of Tom Bombadillo in the victory display. Add Tom Bombadillo to the victory display to shuffle a set-aside copy of Tom Bombadil into the encounter deck. So it costs 2, and then when Tom Bombadil, I don't know if I'm saying his name right or not, but when he comes out, I like that picture. When he comes out, he's a 3/3/3, 6 health. When revealed, choose a player. That player gains control of Tom Bombadil, ready and committed to the quest. At the end of the round, remove Tom Bombadil and a copy of Tom Bombadillo in the victory display from the game. This effect cannot be cancelled. So he spoils an encounter card, and you get a 3 willpower, 3 attack, 3 shield character for 1 round. And he commits to the quest, and then he can attack or defend. But you can't rely on it. You can play it only if you control a Hobbit hero. You have to play Tom Bombadillo first for 2 resources, and then you have to shuffle Tom Bombadil in. It's a song, which there is some song synergy, and you can get songs out of the encounter deck using other cards, at least Rivendell Minstrel, I think it is. So you can use those cards to add to the reliability of this card. But even so, you still have to wait for it to come out of the encounter deck, and you only get 1 turn from it. Spoiling an encounter card is great, but I don't know if this card does enough to justify the effort of setting it up. So I think it's another fun thematic card. But I love that they included a version of Tom Bombadil in the game. And I think as fun thematic cards go, it's probably going to be pretty fun in a Hobbit deck, like a fun thematic Hobbit deck. So I like it for that purpose quite a bit. Durians Axe. 1 cost, guarded by an enemy, restricted, attached to a hero. Attached hero gets +2 attack. After attached hero attacks and destroys an enemy, deal 1 damage to an enemy engaged with you. It's a great attachment with the same caveat as all other guarded cards, which is that you almost never want to use it early, because you usually can't take an additional enemy early in true solo. A lot of the difficult quests are on a razor's edge as it is. So you often can't play Durians Axe in true solo until you've stabilized the board, at which point you don't need it anymore. But as fun thematic cards go, it's another great attachment. All the attachments I think that have been guarded have been really good, the player card ones. If you could set up a deck to take advantage of them, it would be a lot of fun. It wouldn't be elite, but it'd be a lot of fun. You'd end up just demolishing quest decks encounter decks once you get set up. Charge into battle, 5 cost, play only after the staging step. You may declare and resolve an attack against each non-unique enemy in the staging area as if it were engaged with you. That's cool. So it's designed for if you've got a lot of characters on the table and a lot of enemies in the staging area, but you don't have the ability to simply tank them and attack them the normal way, 1 by 1, or even 2 at a time. That's not a situation that occurs very often in true solo. If you've got the ability to take advantage of this card, you've likely got the ability to just kill the enemies the normal way. This seems like a card that's designed more for multiplayer, where you could have players doing different roles, and maybe your tactics player wants to attack the staging area. Well, I don't know. Does it make more sense in multiplayer? It says you may declare, so it's just the player that plays it. 5 tactics resources takes a long time to generate. Oh, I don't think this card is good in true solo. It's probably got the same caveat in multiplayer. If you had the cards on the board to take advantage of it, why wouldn't you be able to just engage the enemies 1 at a time normally? Unless you really had a lot coming out at a time, and that happens more often in multiplayer than in solo. True solo, where you're only revealing 1 card per round instead of 2 or 3 or 4 in multiplayer. So I'd say this card makes more sense to me in terms of ideal usage in multiplayer than solo. I can't imagine a situation where I'd play this in true solo. It's so expensive. Maybe if it cost 2. Be a really good card at 2 cost. 3 or 4 in true solo is probably too much, and 5 is ridiculous for a true solo game. Silver Circlet, 2 cost, attached to a spirit hero, limit 1 per hero. Attached hero gets 2 willpower. It's okay. Celebrian Stone does this, 2 cost for 2 willpower. It also grants a icon to Aragorn. It's okay. There's not much else to say about it. You 2 cost for 2 willpower. Now, would you rather play this attachment, or would you rather play a 2 cost for 2 willpower ally? A 2 cost for 2 willpower ally gives you more in most situations because it can also be used as a jump blocker in an emergency. Potentially it can attack should the ally have any attack on it. All this card does is willpower, so it's probably inferior in most situations to a 2 cost for 2 willpower ally, and there are quite a lot of them at this point in the game. So you'd need a situation where you can specifically, or a deck, where you can specifically take advantage of attachments but not of allies. And there are some quests like that punish you for playing more allies, and so that's probably the best usage for this card, is to add more willpower against quests that punish you for playing allies. And it makes sense in decks like that, but in most quests I'd rather play a 2 cost for 2 willpower ally. Inner Strength, 1 cost, it's a master card, attached to the hero with the 1 ring. Limit 1 per hero, attached hero gets +1 shields. Exhaust the 1 ring and raise your threat by 1 to cancel a shadow effect just triggered during an attack. The attached hero is defending. That's really good. That's the best master card by far. That probably makes the 1 ring worth playing all by itself. A problem that a lot of decks have is that the defender hero, like for example Thranduil, the Sylvan synergy defensive hero, has 3 shields. You really need 4 for a top tier defender, and this gives a hero like Thranduil 4 on turn 1 guaranteed, and you can cancel a shadow effect that's just been triggered. It's a response, not an action, so you can cancel a shadow effect just triggered for 1 threat at any time. That's a phenomenal card and opens up a lot of options for deck building. It elevates some synergies in exactly the way that they need. Greatly reduces the luck involved in getting a defensive hero set up. Greatly reduces the reliance on Jubiar as a top tier defender. This is a phenomenal card, and I'm sorry to say probably worth purchasing the adventure pack just for this if you're a player focused on defeating the hardest quests in the game. Even though all the other cards have been either niche like Silver Circlet or fun thematic cards, this card is really, really good, Inner Strength, and opens up a lot of possibilities. I like it quite a bit. The Elrond Grimbeorn deck that I've been playing would definitely run this with the 1 ring in there. Stick the 1 ring on Grimbeorn. Stick Inner Strength on him turn 1. Now he's at 4 shields and can cancel shadow effects. That's really, really good. That makes him so much better than he already was. So this is a fantastic card, Inner Strength. Now we have a contract. The Burglar's Turn. You cannot include attachments in your deck. Oof, okay. Choose 14 different item or artifact attachments from your collection and shuffle them together. This is your loot deck. Flip this card over and place your loot deck face down under it. Side B, the active location gets +1 quest point for each attachment attached to it. After you travel to a location, attach the top card of your loot deck face up to that location as a guarded objective. If that attachment has the guarded X keyword, ignore it. When the active location is explored, you may put each guarded attachment on that location into play at no cost or add it to your hand. Well, this card would be phenomenal if it didn't say you cannot include attachments in your deck. The Steward of Gondor is not an item or an artifact, and so the Burglar's Turn limiting you by preventing you from playing Steward of Gondor means this could never be an elite card. All by itself, that text relegates this card to fun thematic status. It has, now from a fun thematic standpoint, it has very obvious potential in that it makes guarded cards so much better. It's got synergies with Haldan. I think it would make for a very fun deck to be able to play the guarded cards while mitigating the downside of the guarded keyword. But the inability to play Steward of Gondor in this deck means this could never be elite, but it looks like a lot of fun to play. I definitely enjoy playing it. So like every card in this adventure pack except Inner Strength, it's a fun thematic card. But man, is Inner Strength good. It's really, really good. And that's probably on purpose. All fun thematic cards and then one good reason to buy the adventure pack for a serious player. Yeah. But yeah, the Burglar's Turn. It looks like a lot of fun to play all the fun guarded attachments without needing to include them in your deck. Even you make a separate loot deck. That's a great idea. And if it wasn't for not being able to play Steward of Gondor, if you could play Steward of Gondor in this deck, I actually think it would be really good. Possibly an elite deck, but not being able to play Steward of Gondor. Every deck I've ever played is so reliant on that card for resource generation that the inability to include it single-handedly makes this not elite, but it looks like a lot of fun. So, a fun thematic expansion with one really good card. Yeah, thanks for watching.